English language is an exam which everyone is scared of, and everyone is also scared of section B unless they are a very, very, very good writer. So, as a creative writing teacher and a tutor and a writer myself, I thought I would go through my 10 top tips to help you nail the description for paper 1 and just get the best writing out of yourself that you possibly can. Obviously, these top tips are not the be-all and end-all. There are things you can do outside of these tips. You don't have to take all of them into account, but they're kind of a good broad stroke way to look at your exam and to help you prepare for what is quite a difficult section of quite an important exam. And just to be super clear, these are all really good tips for descriptive writing only. So please don't take any of these tips or all of these tips and just straight up apply them to like section B of paper 2 for AQA and EdXL. Those are completely different questions that we're going to be looking at a different time and a different video, but today we're just looking at paper 1 and how to write really good description. I would also like to apologise for my nails because I talk so much with my hands, you might have already noticed. I'm just looking at them on my little monitor. They are, yeah, I've lost a few. My job tomorrow is to fix them up. Don't worry, I'm sorting that out tomorrow. So to clarify, in your exam you'll probably get given a picture. They sometimes give you something a bit like this or a bit like this, although when you come to do your exam you'll realise the printing quality is not always like amazing. But you will get a picture and they will ask you to write some sort of description of the picture, and often they say something like inspired by this picture or related to this picture. So you don't have to write a literal description of these pictures or whatever picture you get in your exam, but you will have to write some sort of description inspired by, keeping the mood of, that kind of thing. You do have the choice to answer a different question, by the way, for this exam. You can write a narrative piece, but we're just thinking about descriptive writing and what you would do if you were to choose the descriptive piece, which I think is the easier one, and I generally tell my students when they're choosing to choose the descriptive one. But today we're only looking at what would happen if you chose the descriptive one, and all these tips again are for the descriptive one. Have I said descriptive one enough times? Descriptive one. Tip number 1 is to ask yourself questions, which I know is a bit funny because you're in the exam, you should be answering the questions, but when you're planning, asking questions is one of the most important things that you can do. There are lots of different types of questions that you can ask, and they should all be around your 5 senses to start off with. So for example, what would it sound like to be in this place? What would it smell like to be in this place? What kind of things can I feel in this place? What does it look like? And then if you're really lucky, it kind of, I don't mind if you don't get this one, but you kind of want to think about taste. Maybe if you're in the sea, is the air going to be salty? Maybe if you're in somewhere where the air might be stale, that kind of thing. You are very rarely going to get a picture with food, so don't worry too much, but it's just good to consider. You then want to branch out from these 5 senses and start thinking about bigger things. I generally have 3 main questions that I ask myself before I write a description, and they are, what temperature is it? What's the weather like? And are there any other people around? By answering these questions, I get a really good feel immediately for the atmosphere of the piece that I'm going to be writing. And I also include lots of good detail just from those 3 questions alone. Questions equal detail. The more questions you ask, the more detail you're going to use in your work, the more ideas you're going to have. It might feel really counterintuitive to just start writing questions and giving yourself more work to do in your exam, but actually by doing that, you're going to have really good ideas and you're going to be thinking much more deeply about the picture than you would if you just looked at the picture for 5 minutes. Obviously, the level of planning that you're going to do is up to you and up to how you use your time. You know better than me what your planning style is like. You know better than me how much time you need to plan. But I will say that if you're planning and you're not asking yourself questions, then you're kind of limiting yourself, and you're limiting yourself within the picture. Loads of students come to me and they say that they write and write and write for about 20 minutes and then they run out of things to say and they've still got like half their time for section B. You don't want that to happen to you. That's not a nice thing to happen to you in an exam. The more questions you ask, the better. The more questions you ask, the less likely that's going to happen. Easy. Tip number 2 is to list your literary techniques in your plan. What I mean by listing your literary techniques is literally just to list your literary techniques. You should write down simile, metaphor, alliteration, repetition, onomatopoeia, pathetic fallacy, anything you can think of in the moment. And as you write, you should be ticking them off and going through them. So you know from a start that you have a really good range of literary techniques and that you're probably going to use them really well, rather than scrabbling around at the end thinking, oh my god, I need a simile, oh my god, I need a metaphor, and not really paying attention to that. There are really good marks up for grabs for your use of literary techniques, and they want to see a wide range of them and they want to see them used correctly. So the best thing you can do in your planning stage, as well as those lovely questions that you've just asked yourself, is to remind yourself of the literary techniques that you want to use, remind yourself of what they are, and to use them accurately and effectively throughout. You might also find that when you're listing your literary techniques that you want to write like a nice sentence that you've thought of, or a nice, like you might come up with a good simile. So you might write a nice simile that you've thought of, something like that. That's absolutely fine. Once again, it all comes back to planning. The more detail you put in your plan, the easier your answer is going to be to write, and you're saving yourself time. I know it's cliche. I know people used to say it to me when I was at school, like, the more time you plan, the faster you'll write your answer. It's true. I hate to tell you, but it's true. I don't know what else to say. Yeah, it's true. Do it. Just do it. Spend more time in your plan and include a wide range of things, and it will absolutely 100% help you out. My third top tip is to be really, really aware of your structure. One of my old professors was talking to me once about writing plays, and he said that if you get your structure completely wrong, you might not notice immediately, but everything's going to feel off as a result. And I've come to realise through my writing career and through teaching writing and seeing loads of people's work come across my desk, that it's the case. If something feels wrong in your work, if you've written something for revision and it just feels a bit off, it's really likely that it's your structure that's playing you up. Structure can be really difficult for descriptions because you kind of just move through the piece and it kind of doesn't feel like anything has to happen in a specific order. But that's a lie. That's a big lie. Things have to happen in a very specific order in structure and description. That is how it works. I cannot emphasize this to you enough. There has to be a clear structure when it comes to description, especially because it feels like there shouldn't be a structure. You need something solid to hang your lovely description around. You guys might be sitting at home watching this video or wherever you're watching it thinking, I have a structure that I like to use, it works well for me, and that's fine. That's perfectly okay. I'm not going to sit here and tell you to do things that you might be less experienced with or feel less confident with. If you've got something that works for you, that's absolutely fine. But if you're not sure about structure and you're writing a description, I would always recommend the zooming out structure. I think it's the best one, it's the easiest one, and it makes the most sense. The way that works is you take probably what's in your photo and you zoom out around it and you build the world around it as you go. So you start really small with one really small object, and then you zoom out and include more and more and more and more until you have like a really full big picture. Think of those like really big paintings or those like really complicated images that you sometimes see that have like a million things going on. Imagine you're in the middle of it and you're just looking at like one thing, and then you're going to incorporate more and more and more and more. That is the best way, I think, if you're unsure of structure, to do it. There are other ways, but I would just recommend that one. Be careful as well for descriptions that you're not dotting from thing to thing. I always say to people, like, if I came into your room and I looked around like this, smoothly and slowly, and I looked at everything, I would get a much better picture than if I came into whatever room you're in now and was like, So just make your eyes do that in your description. Start off with one thing, describe it, start off with the next thing, describe it, and move along like that. And if you feel like you're getting a bit like tied up in it, you're probably describing too many things and then not enough detail. So hone back on what you're writing about and really add more detail and more emphasis on what's going on. Really be thinking about it like a camera or a film, right? If you're watching a film and it goes everywhere, you're not gonna have a good idea of what's going on. But if the film camera like tracks nicely across the scene, you're gonna have a really good idea of what's happening. You want clear, still focus on one thing after another, moving politely, correctly, easily from one to another, and then you're going to see really clear structure, and it's going to be easier for you to write and easier for your reader to follow. And this leads me on to tip number 4, which feels really obvious, but the tip is to write a description. So many times people start answering a question which is about description and they write a story instead, and then they lose loads of marks because they've not written in the correct genre. Loads of people do this thing where they choose the description question and then they just write a story instead, and it means that they lose loads of marks even if their writing's really good, because they're not writing in the correct genre and they've not adapted their writing for the right purpose. There is a reason that they give you 2 questions and you're choosing a question. One is a description and one is a story, and they both function really differently. Obviously you're going to have moments of description within your story, but you shouldn't have moments of story within your description. if that makes any sense. Your description shouldn't really have a main character, and your description should stay in one place. There should be no moving from place to place, there should be no introduction of characters, there should be no dialogue really, and there also shouldn't be any big event that happens that then we have sort of like events following on from it. You should imagine your description as like a short film that's on loop of the place, so things might be in motion but it's never going to go anywhere. For example, if you're describing a beach scene, you might talk about the fact that there are children running around and playing in the sand, and you might talk about the fact that they're screaming, you might talk about the sound of the waves, you might talk about the waves moving, you might talk about birds flying overhead, but nothing is going to happen outside of that. Everything has to be sort of stuck in a sort of 3 or 4 second loop where things happen again and again and again. Otherwise you're going to come to the point where you're writing a story, not description, and then you're going to lose marks. So don't do it. It takes a bit of time to get to grips with the difference. I would say that when you're reading a book next, just be really aware of, is this description or is this action? And you'll start to feel the really obvious differences. If you're in doubt as well, you can just make nothing happen. Things can be static, things can be still. As long as your language is really evocative, you probably won't miss out on too much from doing that. But if you really want things to be moving, keep it in like a 4 second loop, and don't get distracted by the lovely idea of something really big and interesting happening, because you'll be undermining your work and all that good description that you've come up with so far. Tip number 5 is to choose a mood and stick to it. What I mean by that is to choose a vibe, an energy, that kind of thing, before you begin, and then be aware of it throughout your piece as you're writing. Let the picture help you out with this. Sometimes they give you pictures that are like overtly scary or overtly happy or overtly sad, so really just lean into whatever they're giving you. Throughout your writing, you're going to want to use language that supports that mood and doesn't really stray away from it, because then you're going to confuse the reader. So if you choose a scary, creepy mood for your piece, don't start using lovely adjectives such as exciting and beautiful and fresh. I don't know, can't think of any more adjectives that are very happy and nice. You want to be thinking of things like creepy, silent, dusty, those kind of words. Think about semantic fields. All your words should sort of match in the same semantic field throughout, and they should all match in tone. Easy. You're going to want to choose language throughout your piece that reflects the mood that you've chosen. So if you've gone for something quite scary and creepy, you don't want to be choosing words like exciting, energetic, happy, smiley. You're going to be wanting to choose words that are like ghostly, quiet, still, you know, that kind of language. You also want to shape all your metaphors and similes and any literary techniques in line with the mood that you've chosen. The most obvious one of these is pathetic fallacy, and you're going to choose weather that matches the mood you've gone for. It's really easy. You probably have a good instinctual knowledge already of which weather sort of goes with which mood. You know that sad is kind of rainy, that happy is sunshine, that scary is thunder and lightning, so just lean into it. There are no marks available for being creative or unusual with your use of pathetic fallacy or your use of mood. So just make it easy for yourself and use weather that fits really nicely. Obviously, some weather can be used in multiple ways. For example, a really hot day can be a really lovely day, but it also can be really oppressive and inescapable. So that's again where we come back to our metaphors and similes and our use of semantic field, because that's going to help support whatever you're doing with your pathetic fallacy and creating that mood. Weather is really key though. I would definitely not skip it. If you're writing something that's entirely inside, you might even want to have just like a window with rain against it or big harsh sunshine coming through, because it means that you've ingrained the mood throughout the piece and you're just getting really good marks for that. Tip number 6 is to use language that suits you and your writing style. There are really good marks up for grabs for using a variety of sort of nuanced, intelligent, well-chosen language, but if you're choosing language that you're not very confident with, it's going to bleed through and it's going to be obvious to the examiner that you kind of just bungled these words in and they don't really make sense. Lots of really good writers don't use overly extravagant language, but what they do is they use words that are the best words for them. The more words you know, the better equipped you are to express yourself and to help you with your writing, but if you're throwing in words that you don't know what they mean, then you're not going to do yourself very good, right? You're not going to get good marks and it's not going to reflect nicely on you. It's going to feel a little bit clumsy and it's going to feel a little bit disruptive. I once, when I was at university, wrote this piece that I'd use loads of words that I wasn't really too comfortable with, and one of my professors, she explained it to me like it's like you're driving down a road and you hit a pothole. So you're having a really nice time and you're cruising along really smoothly, and then suddenly something jolts you and bumps you out of it. And she was like, it's really obvious that you're just not comfortable with this vocabulary, and it comes through in your exams. I promise you, I see it lots and lots and lots where people use ambitious vocabulary, which is lovely. I love seeing ambitious vocabulary, but they're not overly happy with what it means. It doesn't feel like it's a natural part of their sort of like day-to-day usage, and it kind of doesn't suit them very well, and it feels out of place. The best thing you can do with your writing is to build up a good sort of internal dictionary of words that you like to use, words that are really lovely and evocative, words that are really lovely and descriptive, and use those ones to your best ability and get really comfortable with them. You will find that you naturally turn to the same words over and over again, and that's okay. As a writer, I do it all the time. I know that other writers who I've worked with do it as well. It's just kind of something that happens. But your examiner's only seeing one piece of writing for you. So it doesn't matter if you've used that in every single mock exam and every single practice paper, that turn of phrase, that simile, that description, because guess what? They don't know that. They don't know about any of that. They just know what you write in the exam. I want to make it really clear that I don't mean just use really flat, boring language. You should be trying to use sort of more expressive, more descriptive, more evocative pieces of language as you write, but they shouldn't be everything and they shouldn't be everywhere. You should try and not use the word very as much as possible. It's a bit of a sign that you've not thought through your language usage. But at the same time, if you don't know a good alternative for the word like very cold in the moment, you can just use very cold. But if you're using words that you don't know what they mean, and you're using words that you don't feel comfortable with, that's going to undermine you more than it's going to help you, and it's going to take away from what you're doing and all the good work you're putting in crafting and creating a really lovely atmosphere or a really lovely description. Tip number 7 is to vary your sentences, and I don't just mean long and short, but I mean structurally as well. There are a really wide range of sentence structures that you can use, and they really open up a lot of doors for you, and they save you lots of time worrying about how to move from one idea to the next, but they also save you a lot of time wondering if your punctuation and your grammar is quite correct. Varied sentence length is important because it comes up in the mark scheme, first of all, and second of all because it has an impact on your piece that nothing else really can. If you want the piece to speed up, you're going to use short, sharp sentences. You can even use sentences that are like one word. And if you want a piece to slow down, you're going to use longer sentences that sort of flow really easily into each other. You can also use longer sentences that reflect characters' thoughts when they're overwhelmed or stressed. It kind of is really up to you and what's going on in your piece, but I would definitely tell you that it's something that you can't skip and you can't ignore and you can't avoid. There are some sentence structures as well which allow you to sort of enhance your use of language, and they help you across the board. So for example, a double adjective sentence, so happy and excited she went to school, allows you to use 2 adjectives in the place of just 1, and it allows you to transform the sentence into something a little bit more interesting. Just figure out what you like to do, play around with your sentence structures and see what happens and what is the best for you, and you'll naturally find that you are chopping and changing and adding lots of lovely variety. The more variety you have in your sentences, the more variety you have in your piece, the absolute better. My top tip number 8 is to not forget your describing words. It might sound really primary school, but we need adjectives and we need adverbs, so words that describe things and words that describe actions. People often forget to use their adjectives and adverbs because they're so focused on writing something that's like good or interesting that they forget that on a sentence level we do need interesting vocabulary. Don't be too focused on the bigger picture to have really good stuff going on at sentence level. That is something that a lot of people miss out on, and it's something that really adds another dimension or more depth or sort of another quality to your work, and it shows that you're completely in control of every single sentence that you're coming up with. There is the slight risk that you might overwrite a few of your sentences, so don't go crazy on the adjectives and adverbs, but you don't want to have multiple sentences in a row unless you're doing it on purpose that don't have lovely good description words. This is a description. You need to describe things. You need to use your adjectives and adverbs. It's fairly simple. Tip number 9 for me is don't be afraid to steal from other writers. You should be, as part of your revision, revising by reading lots and lots of stuff from a variety of genres genres and a variety of writers. And what you should be doing is underlining or highlighting or making little notes of all the nice sentences and the really good descriptions that you can find. Obviously, you can't just like go into your exam and rewrite a whole book. That's not possible, and also they will notice. But you can magpie little ideas, little similes, little descriptions of your choice that really enhance your writing. I'm a writer and I still use things that I read because they got lodged in my brain and I've stolen them forever and they're mine now. There are writers like Sophie McIntosh who come up with really beautiful like one sentence descriptions. There are writers like Emma Cline who use language in a really sort of vivid, enhancing way. And you should really be thinking about which writers you think are going to serve your work the best and which ideas you can steal from them. Obviously, don't take whole characters and whole plot lines and all that stuff, but if you want to take a sentence, a simile, a metaphor, you can, and you can practice with it, and you'll find that in practicing with it and using it lots, you're going to shift it and change it, and it's going to become yours, and you're going to find that it's going to become something that's really rewarding to use and feels like it slots really nicely into your work. When I say steal though, I don't mean steal from ChatGPT. I would like to make that clear. I can tell, and everyone I know can tell, when something's been written on ChatGPT, because it has a very specific tone of voice, it uses metaphor in a very specific way, simile in a very specific way, it like rounds up its paragraph. It's just, I can just tell. I can tell, and I'm not a full-time examiner. So don't be going onto ChatGPT and being like, ooh, write me a piece of description and learning it and parroting out in your exam. It's not going to get you anywhere. You should really be reading widely and using those like real writers who have really thought through what they're using and their words and their similes and their metaphors, and you should be practicing with those rather than anything that an AI can come up with. Tip number 10 is to use your time wisely, and please don't get it mixed up. Oh my god, I have seen so many good writers and so many good candidates and students lose really good marks because they just weren't organised with their time. You should be thinking about time for planning, you should be thinking about time for writing, and you should be thinking about time for checking. I know section B feels a little bit easier than section A, but please don't take time from section B to use on section A, because then the thing I see the most is that people just don't finish for section B, and it's really sad because they have all these wonderful ideas but they just don't quite get going because they've not got the time. So that's all my top tips for section B description. As I said before, I will be doing more videos on how to use your sentence structures correctly, how to do metaphors and similes in a really lovely way, thinking about all different elements of writing as well as other elements of the exam. So please do like and subscribe if you are at all interested in those. If you have any questions for me, please pop them down in the comments. I will always be here to get back to you, and I hope you guys have a very happy time revising, and I look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Bye!